Welcome to Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. My name is Mompoloki Lerumo Mogobe. Our objective is to enthuse, inspire, energize, and empower entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of all stripes here in BW and beyond. We do so by inviting these entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs into our makeshift studio. Sometimes we call them to the restaurant, sometimes we go to our studio, and we ask them to share their experiential knowledge, their experiences and their expertise. And we ask them as many questions as we can, aimed at empowering you also as a viewer. Hello viewer, hello listener, my name is Mompoloki Lerumo Mogobe. Let me welcome you to another episode of Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. As always, we try to bring you impactful, life-changing information. Today we're going to talk about all things financial. I brought a chartered accountant who's also an angel investor, but I prefer that my guests introduce themselves. Welcome, Mehdi, and please just tell the viewers who you are and share a little bit of your background.
A very good morning, Mr. Mogobe and viewers. My name is Madhavan Venkatachy. That may sound mouthful, but please, I'm known more closely as Maddie.
Yes.
To everyone. And I'm a chartered accountant, as you mentioned, with over 20 years of experience in the business of finance, accounting, audits, financial management, and so on. I'm a partner at Grant Thornton in Botswana.
Okay. I think Grant Thornton has got resonance with me because it was started by a friend of mine, Mr. Rajaram. You know, it started off as a place called Acumen. Are you familiar with that history?
Well, I am. I came in when it was still called Grant Thornton Acumen. We were a part of Acumen Consulting, and then eventually we chose to be Grant Thornton itself. Okay. Though the Acumen remains very well with us, and remains within each one of us. Working. Okay.
What does the firm do generally, and what do you specifically do at Grant Thornton?
We are specialist advisors. We are business consultants. We are financial management planners for several businesses across the country and the world at large. And we also provide accounting, audit, forensic, advisory services. Okay.
And which division are you in yourself specifically?
In the more tougher one, I am an audit partner.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the thing about audits, if I'm correct, is that you tend to travel a lot. Auditors never seem to rest. The friends of mine who are auditors tell me they're always being sent all over the place.
Well, true, Mr. Mogobe, we usually do travel a lot, but COVID has taught us new ways of doing things. We've realized that travel is absolutely not essential to complete an audit. We could do it remotely as well. And obviously, these are learnings from COVID and the post-pandemic times.
The subject we're going to discuss is financial management of cash flow. Why do you believe this subject is important? Why do you think it's important to discuss it?
Well, as an auditor, what I've seen, Mr. Mogobe, is many times businesses fail not because they don't have a product, not because they don't have a viable market. They fail because they are very poor with financial management and planning. Many times they tend to put things off until it's too late. I believe with appropriate financial planning, one could make their businesses turn around and grow. And this is very, very particular to entrepreneurs who are interested in getting into businesses and making a name for themselves.
I've heard it said that cash is king. Is it the sense in which that is king? You need to manage the cash flow?
At the end of the day, you're always measured by the cash you have or the assets that can convert to cash that you have. So I believe cash definitely is king. And yes, what you said is absolutely spot on. Cash is the way of measure of how successful a business is.
Okay, so what are the things to put in place if you're going to be successful at financial management? What are the key ingredients, so to speak?
Well, firstly, I would say one has to have a mind to understand that financial planning and cash management is key. Because when we have a product, we tend to be overzealous. We tend to believe that the market is wide and everyone would come to you. They would all come to you and they would take it. But if they don't pay you in return, you're going to struggle making a living out of it. And my view is, whatever it is that you do it considering the effective rollover or turnaround into cash. And that is very, very important from my perspective.
Do you think, as a starting point, it's important for small businesses to have a chartered accountant or somebody with high financial acumen within their businesses when they start?
When everyone is born, Mr. Mogobe, they are accountants. They calculate a lot of things in their life. They calculate about what it is that they have to do in the morning, what is it that they have to do in the evening, and how do they get the best out of it. So I don't think one has to necessarily go to a professional accountant at the startup stage. What they will have to understand is elements of accounting and financial management that will help them plan their businesses better throughout the time that they operate.
I'm asking you this because there's sort of a debate happening whether it is best to have an in-house chartered accountant or to have an external chartered accountant.
Chartered accountants or accountants, professional accountants, if I may put it that way, sometimes tend to be a bit expensive. I am a chartered accountant, but the way I look at things is, please seek help, and seek help in any way possible. If you can afford somebody in-house to manage your affairs, so be it. But there are several service firms that provide these services, and seek help when you think you need it.
Okay.
That's my way of looking at it.
Looking at our current landscape, generally at the ecosystem, would you say that financial literacy is beginning to take hold, or do we have a problem with financial literacy?
I wouldn't call it a problem, but definitely people are becoming more aware of what elements of finance they have to know, what elements of accounting they have to know, and that is actually a very, very key element of running or being successful in business. Your business is only as successful as you actually want it to be. And my personal view is, once you've realized that you have a business, please concentrate on elements of finances that are important to it. Okay. Don't just focus on the product, focus on the outcome of the product.
Okay. Now let's talk about financing options in terms of what's available out there. Would you just go through the various options that are available for an entrepreneur?
Mr. Mogobe, let me say there are numerous options, right? And one usually thinks that for them to get financing, they have to go to a bank, stand in a queue, get a loan. I wouldn't say that is the only option. There are several options. You've got micro lenders, you've got banks, you've got, the third kind, which is more a social kind, called the angel investors.
Yeah, of which you and I are members of Angel Network Botswana.
Absolutely, Mr. Mogobe. As you rightly said it, we are a network of angel investors, which means you can come to us if you have a conception, if you have a product, if you believe that you have a product that is viable in the market, come to us, display what it is that you can do and how it is that it can benefit the public at large, and we'll consider about how we can get more investors to come and help you in your business.
I often tell people that there are only two requirements. One, are you investable? And B, are you scalable? Am I right in saying those are the key pillars?
Absolutely. I don't think anyone could have said it any better than you did. Scalability, and the most very important part I would say, when let's say it's scalable, is we all think Botswana is a small country. But let's not constrain our operations by boundaries. Today, the world is global. There are no borders. And when we look at scalability, we have to look at products that could be viable across different continents, different countries, and that will make life a lot easier.
Yeah. Now, let's break it down. Make it simple for the would-be investor, the young, potential investee. What do they have to do to qualify for angel investing?
Like you mentioned, have a concept. Be creative. Try to bring your imagination and your creativity into fore and say, I have a product that's worth saleable. That's worth reaching out to the market for. My way of again advising, or rather talking to the entrepreneurs, is when your strongest asset, the strongest asset that a person has, which is very marketable, is creativity, right? And once you start looking at what it is that you can bring to the market and create a need for a product, then it becomes a more marketable product. Once you've done that, make a pitch that attracts investors into understanding your concepts and your views so that they can come and contribute to your capital at the end of the day.
Yeah. I can imagine someone watching, hearing you saying a pitch, saying, what is that? Can you explain how it works with the pitching?
Let me break it down and say pitching is a process where you come up with your concept, you demonstrate, or you rather explain it to the investors and say, well, here's my product, this is what I do, this is what I would need to get this product viable in the market, these are the elements that I can pay you, these are the costs that I can pay you over a period in time, because every investor who wants to come and put in money wants something in return. And usually what happens is people are more interested not just in the return, but also in the concept of how a person can really make a difference to the whole environment at large.
Yes.
How can they make a presence in the local market?
Okay. Without maybe mentioning names, can you give some of the examples of the kind of businesses or entrepreneurs we've invested in?
I'm very proud, Mr. Mogobe, when I say that Angel Network Botswana has invested in several startups in the country. Some, like you say, are into the property field, some into the digital field, some into the beauty, cosmetic and hospitality field.
Yeah.
And that those are...
And e-commerce as well.
And in e-commerce as well, yes. So these are, like I said, we don't focus on any particular industry because we believe in the product rather than the industry they come from. So my suggestion is, if you're creative, create the need, and once you've created the need, you can then make it a lot marketable.
And what would you say impressed us or you the most about these young entrepreneurs that were taking our hard-earned money and putting into? What was the decisive factor?
Firstly, I would say the scalability. Is it marketable? Is it viable? Is the product viable? And can it be scalable to a larger market? Once that happens, I think investors start feeling a lot more comfortable into making the investment. Obviously, don't bring products that you think are, confined to just one or two, let me say, one or two people who need it. Yeah. Make it large, make it scalable so that people understand that this is a product that will sustain over a period in time rather than just die out in a day or two or a month.
One of the things we insist on is that you must demonstrate traction or proof of concept. That is important, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And why is that important?
Well, everybody believes only when they see it. Like you said, seeing is believing. So you demonstrate a product, make one feel that the need is absolute. Then seeing is believing. Everybody starts believing that the product is now extremely important for the market. And if you look at what we currently use and consume on a daily basis, not much of those were needs earlier. They were created by people who had the concept, who conceptualized and said, okay, without a cell phone, you won't be able to live a life. And that's what it has come to.
All right, let's talk about record keeping and management. And this is something that you can talk at in general in terms of its importance, and then maybe just hone it in, giving examples of what we're talking about when we talk about the importance of record keeping.
Mr. Mogobe, when one invests into a business, there has to be a very clear distinction between what is personal and what is business. You invest into the business and the business has to return back to you. And that means having records that can maintain the flow of transactions. Why I say record maintenance and record keeping is important here is many businesses again fail because they believe that they've got a product, they sell the product, but they don't have the records to substantiate what it is that they do. And at the end of the day, if someone were to invest or someone wants to come and be a partner, they realize that the person does not have the discipline of maintaining information. Then what kind of confidence would an investor get?
Zero,
right? And so it's essential from my own perspective that you maintain records in a way, it can be maintained. And believe me, nothing is difficult. Today we are in a world where millions of options are available to keep records, and many of them with absolutely, should I say, very trivial costs. So it can be maintained. Record keeping of your businesses, of what it is that you do. And when I'm not talking just in terms of the financial records. You need to have a record of what it is that you do on a daily basis as an activity from a business perspective, because that will bring in discipline of translating all those acts into something that eventually converts into money.
Yeah, but break it down. What sort of records is that? Are we talking ledgers? Are we talking software? What sort of records?
So let's talk about financial records, and I would say the financial records comprise of your invoices, of your vouchers, of your bank statements, of your checkbooks, and all this can be maintained electronically and converted into probably a books of accounts using softwares that are very, very easily accessible and available in the market.
Yeah.
Many of those are cloud-based, so you don't necessarily have to invest in a computer to store that information for you. They can be stored in the cloud, so it makes it easier. And the records are primarily your bank statements, your vouchers, and eventually they translate into ledgers.
Yeah, you talk about also software. There's QuickBooks, and there's Pastel, and things like that. How important is it to get it right in terms of choosing the right software?
Botswana is becoming increasingly regulated, and it is essential that we comply with the local laws and regulations. One of the laws of the country is that you must have records that can substantiate a double entry account keeping, which is basically a accrual basis of accounts. The softwares that, like you said, the QuickBooks, Pastel, should I say Xero, they all achieve this fairly easily, and they're not very expensive. So it is necessary to get it into a system that's acceptable by the regulatory authorities. And I would say, again, invest in something that's scalable to your business. You don't have to go and buy the versions that serve hundreds of users. Look at something that you can use all by yourself. You don't need to get a financial accountant to do it. Those are very simple to learn and easy. You just have to capture the necessary information, and it starts working right from day one.
Yeah. Based on your experience, Madi, can you cite one or two examples of where record keeping proved to be very, very helpful? And then perhaps one or two examples where the lack of records had maybe a devastating effect. I want you to look on the positive and on the negative.
Yes, Mr. Mogobe, I'll talk of the positives because those really appeal to me. Right, record keeping, like you say, makes it a lot easier because it brings in discipline. And in my perspective, and in my view, and I think you'll agree with me, is that businesses succeed because one has a discipline of doing repeated tasks that eventually translate into something worth. And record keeping, in my view, has helped many businesses. When I say record keeping, I'm talking about maintaining the right kind of records. We've known of litigations in this country. We've known of various corporate litigations specifically, where the taxman goes after people and says, yes, you owe me 100 million, you owe me 200 million, and so on. And eventually you realize that those are sorted out because there is a clear traction. There's a clear track of how records are maintained, how transactions were kept, and what were the purpose and intent behind every transaction. So it has helped many individuals in this country. And poor record keeping, we know of failures again in our country. This include certain government-owned entities. These include private enterprises. These include large corporates as well, where the assumption was that record keeping was not as important. When I say record keeping, I'm talking about proper and appropriate record keeping. And eventually it did lead to scandals and media, should I say, coming heavily on businesses and investors eventually losing money. We know of cases in this country. This happened as well.
Yeah. And so it can have a devastating effect on the business if records are not kept. Now, enforcement of those records, what are CEOs and managers and founders to do to make sure that their entities, they enforce a record-keeping mechanism? I mean, I want to shift the responsibility to founders and CEOs. What do they have to do? What's their responsibility?
Firstly, I think it all starts with the intent. The founders and the investors have to realize that they need appropriate track record of how businesses keep information, and they must enforce this discipline by getting the people with the right mindset to maintain information, not just maintain information, but to maintain information on a timeless basis. Make sure that the information is timely. You don't put off record keeping. You don't put off recording a transaction until too late. Make it a discipline to do this on a regular basis, and they eventually help, because at any point in time you get to understand how does my financial books, how does my balance sheet look, how does my investment look, where is the company headed. So I would say it's extremely important that investors and founders kind of imbibe the culture of record keeping and maintenance of financial records right from the word go.
Yeah, I like the word imbibe because it implies you absorb it, you internalize it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Accounting frameworks and options. What accounting frameworks exist and what are options there?
Yeah. When I again talked about record keeping, I also spoke about the regulatory environment that we are in. Thankfully, Botswana is a bit liberal in terms of how and what frameworks can be followed by companies. A small startup company, a company that's just finding its feet, need not go to the complexities of maintaining records or rather maintaining their books of accounts in frameworks that are very difficult to comprehend and understand. So we've got something called the micro GAAP, which basically is a micro generally accepted accounting principles.
Yes.
It's a micro GAAP, it's a GAAP, it's however you say it. But it's the generally accepted accounting principles which require that you maintain books of records on an accrual basis. You say, I have earned this revenue, and you account for something around a debtor or a creditor based on that kind of transaction, which is a very simple set. It is should I say, guidelines are published by the Botswana Institute of Chartered Accountants and the Botswana Accountancy Oversight Authority. You can take those and adopt it for yourself.
That's BICA.
That's BICA.
Yeah.
Then you've got the IFRS, which is the more complicated framework. That complicated framework is applicable to public companies and where public accountability is necessary. This includes banks, this includes entities regulated by the non-banking financial institution regulatory authority. This includes your public listed companies on the Botswana Stock Exchange. And between the micro GAAP and the IFRS, or the International Financial Reporting Standards, you've got something in between, which is applicable to many businesses who have been in the country for long. This is called the IFRS for SME, which is
IFRS for SMEs.
IFRS for SME, International Financial Reporting Standards for small and medium enterprise. So the very word small and medium enterprises makes it scalable. You can determine whether you're small, you can determine whether you're a medium-sized entity, and eventually apply it. So long you don't have public accountability. You can use this framework, which is a framework with rules that one has to follow, and those are not complicated. So yeah, these options are available, and not many actually think they know that there is a micro GAAP that's available. So people start saying, hey, financial account keeping is very difficult in our times in the country, and I say, no, you've got options. Just know that there are options.
Yeah, I was going to ask you whether it means necessarily one has to find somebody of your skill, a chartered accountant, to help them maneuver through all these. Sometimes it seems as if it's almost like a maze, a labyrinth you have to maneuver through.
Mr. Mogobe, it depends on, I would say, it depends entirely on the person who's seeking the information. If you have a toothache, you don't go and take a rock and, hit it against your tooth to plug it out. You go to a dentist. So it might save you a lot of cost later. And my suggestion is go to a professional accountant. Go to a professional accountant who can provide you the services. And believe me, there are many who can provide it at very reasonable costs. They will help you comply. They'll also make your life easier and simpler. Don't choose somebody on the street. Today,
On the street.
and I say this because the Botswana Institute of Chartered Accountants have come up very clearly with a plan to say, if you need help, you have to go to a professional who is registered with it. You do it otherwise, then you're actually not compliant with the laws. And don't find the easy route out. Find a proper person who can help you with your financial reporting at the end of the day.
Isn't it the fact also the regulator impose certain sanctions or certain penalties if you use a fly-by-night accountant?
Absolutely. They have the right to impose penalties, fines, not just on you, not just on the accountant, but everybody was involved in it. And yes, it comes with very punitive costs.
Okay. Like how serious? Can you give us an example?
The fines are, I don't want to quantify the fines, but the fines can really make your businesses suffer significantly.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about our tax infrastructure. BRS has done its best to make everything online and make it easy and accessible. Do you notice, or would you say that the last few years, going online by BRS has helped in terms of reliable record keeping and cash flow management?
Definitely. Digitization is the way of the world today. With the BRS adopting the MyColo Live system, it's making life a lot easier for individual taxpayers and for small corporates to look at their, perform a health check of their tax and determine whether they owe any money to either the taxman or to any regulatory authority. It's becoming increasingly easier for businesses to do this. However, there are gaps in the system as it currently stands, and I know BRS is fixing as many as possible, as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Speaking of BRS, I want to pick your brain on something that has happened to a friend of mine where they were audited after 6 or 7 years and they couldn't produce the original invoices. But they could establish that they have paid those invoices and VAT has been paid. But because the original invoices were not there, BRS insisted on punishing them. What do you think? To me at the time, I said this is unfair. I even thought of challenging it in court.
Mogobe, I think we started off this discussion with record keeping, and you're actually emphasizing the point of how necessary it is to keep records. Not just because you've incurred a transaction or you've transacted on something, but to prove to the taxman at the end of the day that you have got the appropriate records. Payment to someone or having a transaction in your bank account will not provide enough evidence that the transaction is indeed business related. And I think it's essential that one understands the systems and maintains records. Like you said, the invoices, for example, you have to maintain them so that you can establish that the invoices were with a VAT registered authority or a VAT registered entity, and you have claimed the appropriate VAT as was recorded on the invoice. These make it easier going forward. And I think, again, it goes back to maintenance of appropriate records right from the word go.
Then what is the requirement in terms of the length of time you have to keep those records? Because, as I said, this situation was auditing after 7 years. So how long should the records be kept?
Under the statutory guidelines in the country, books of accounts and records have to be maintained for a period of at least 8 years. So I think your friend came within the 8-year ambit, and
just
that's
1 year.
just
within a year.
You're expected to maintain it for a period of at least 8 years. Having said that, we've got this new act in the country, which is called the Financial Reporting Act, which requires entities to maintain records for as long as 20 years.
Really?
And those apply to your listed companies and many public regulated bodies. So the minimum length of period where you have to maintain records is for a period of 8 years. And I think we spoke about this as well. There are options available. You don't have to pulp those information and store it in your warehouse or store it in your offices, which takes space. You've got cloud accounting today. Go get there.
Do Botswana really understand how it works, this cloud accounting?
I think everyone is slowly getting there.
How does it work?
It's a very simple concept. So you subscribe to a package, you have access with your username and password. These are very highly protected. The background infrastructure is highly protected. The information is actually stored elsewhere. It is located in an offsite location of the service provider. But what happens is
Certainly not in a cloud.
certainly not in the cloud. So what we call the cloud accounting.
Yeah.
But it is stored somewhere. Let's say, let's take examples of European countries where they have got large databases that can be run through their, or rather maintained through their infrastructure that side. It is hosted through the internet. So you maintain information, and when I say information maintenance, I'm talking about scanning your vouchers and including them.
So everything has to be scanned.
It actually makes it easier. We might think that that's a laborious process at the moment, but believe me, you either scan or you get digitized invoices today. You walk into certain stores which give you an option of not even getting a physical invoice. You might actually get it digitally. You just have to provide them with an email address that they can send it to. So those are becoming options. And I think the world will eventually go paperless
from the way it's going. All right. Finalization and statutory compliance. Here, are you talking in terms of auditing and filing audit reports?
It also includes that, Mr. Mogobe. I would say finalization of accounts basically starts with having a period, a financial period that you're recording your information for. Every businesses must determine what financial period do they adopt. Is it a calendar year? Is it April to March, or is it June to July or July to June? It depends.
It's up to you to choose whichever month you want.
Currently, we have the option. So you can choose when you expect to open the financial period and close. And eventually, once that is done, the regulatory bodies, and I'm talking SEPA here, the company's intellectual property, they require you to file those financial statements within a specific period. You've got up to 7 months to file that information with them so that you have complied with the requirements of the SEPA. The BURS require you to submit your tax returns within 4 months from the time that you close your books of accounts. So financial finalization, financial compliance, I would say, is about putting all the transactions in the form of either a balance sheet or an income statement or a set of accounts, if I can call it that, and submitting it to the relevant authorities. It depends on who regulates you, but believe me, almost every entity that has a business in the country is regulated one way or the other by the Botswana Institute of Chartered Accountants, the Botswana Accountancy Oversight Authority.
Yeah. So, and compliance from a tax standpoint, I found that our tax laws are somewhat rather complex. My question to you is that, is it necessary to have a dedicated tax expert, especially if you've reached certain levels of growth, to dedicate it towards not necessarily evading, because that's illegal, but certainly avoiding tax to the extent that the law allows it?
Yes, Mr. Mogobe. Let's break it down into 3 elements. Firstly, do you need a tax expert? And my answer is, it depends on the complexities of your business. You probably don't. If you have simple sets of books, if you have simple transactions that you understand and that you can translate that into your financial records. If that is the case, you don't need to go to an expert. But believe me when I say it is better to go to an expert at the time when things are not too complicated, because they help you plan in a way that it doesn't become complicated at a later stage. So reach out when you believe that you are having a challenge. Reach to an expert who will help you either plan your taxes, like you mentioned it, you can't avoid taxes, but you can definitely plan it. You can plan it in a way that is beneficial to both you, and you also comply with the requirements of the law. You pay lesser tax by effective planning. So these are things that one can do.
Yeah. Is there a particular tax saving that, in your experience, you find a lot of people are not aware of?
Let's take an example where I'm talking about simple salary payment that you make to perhaps your employees, and you might think that I'm going to pay them a lump sum, let's say 5,000 on a monthly basis. what eventually happens is the person receiving it has to pay tax on everything that he gets. But if you structure it down and say, well, here are elements that I could break down. I know you are paying your medical aid certain sum of money. You split and say, oh, now I pay you a part of it, but I pay the medical aid directly a part of it. What happens is he doesn't have to pay taxes on that particular sum anymore. So there are options available. This is just a very, very simple example, but there are options are available to businesses as well.
So you think founders and CEOs need to sit down with their employees and really structure things for in a most tax-advantaged manner?
I would say they would perhaps have to go to somebody with appropriate tax knowledge to understand what structures are available, then take it to their employees and make that offer. It is beneficial to both the employers and the employees at the end of the day. Nobody likes paying taxes.
Yeah, and you won't say it, I'll say it, that Grant Thornton can offer that help, isn't it?
Definitely.
All right. Look, we touched on Angel Network Botswana earlier. I want us to amplify our discussion a bit more on it. Let me ask you, why did you join Angel Network Botswana? What attracted you to it?
Why did you join? I think when somebody calls you an angel, you like it. Right? So, Angel, I joined because I was passionate about looking at the entrepreneurial market in the country, where there are several people with great ideas who want to transform the lives of many, including themselves. They have ideas, they have the creativity, they have a product, and they want somebody to invest in their ability. When I was discussing it with a friend and one of the founders of Angel Network Botswana in the country, Anantram, he came up with this idea to say, let's have this network because it's recognized in many parts of the world, and he wanted us to formalize it. And the idea appealed to me because you would now interact with people like yourself.
Yeah, of
and
course.
That helps us pool our thoughts together and apply our minds to determining whether a company is investable into. You spoke about it.
Yes.
Is the company worth investing into? Is the idea worth investing into? And we can make those assessments of whether a company is worth investing into based on simple, health checks and fact checks.
Yeah, and based on some of the pitches you've already listened to and been exposed to, what would you say the level of dynamism, the level of creativity is in the marketplace here in Botswana?
I would say it's growing. It definitely is growing. When I interact with my own colleagues, my friends, I realize that there's a lot of potential because we're all used to this phrase that necessity is the mother of invention. We've gone beyond that. No longer is it a necessity. You create that necessity through your acts, through how creative you could be. And eventually that will replace something that's being done. And I think the moment you are able to create a need, you already have a viable product.
And still on Angel Network Botswana, there's this element where investors want to take a percentage. In other words, they want equity in the business. And there's also the option of debt, and there's also the option of mentorship. Can you just unravel that and explain how it works and compare and contrast the various options?
I'll start with the last one you mentioned, Mr. Mogobe, the mentorship, right? Many businesses or many entrepreneurs have great ideas. They have great concepts. What they don't have is perhaps the discipline, or perhaps what it is that they lack is somebody to guide them when they need it most. And every startup needs it at inception, believe me. So we have, as a network, realized that you could invest your time by mentoring a person's idea, by talking through what is possible, how he could progress better through having coaching sessions, mentoring sessions. regularly, and this is an idea, you're eventually giving your time away. So you're investing into that business. And the Angel Network Botswana realized that we could do it this way. We could say we are contributing our time, and so we are mentoring a person, and that eventually translates to some form of equity at the end of the day. So we call it the the mentorship as an investment in the NB network. And then we have the options of financing you through debt. Well, obviously, not everyone or anyone
that
wants
one
to.
you may have to explain what you mean. Financing through debt.
So when I say debt, it is about giving options available to the investors or to the entrepreneurs about capital that can be given in the form of a debt, and with certain terms of
just like a bank would do.
Just like a bank would do. And the reason why banks don't do it is, or people don't approach the bankers. Usually, banks require a lot of documentation and proof that you have the ability to repay debt.
They want security as well.
They want security. They want collaterals. They want this and that. Angel Network does not look for any such option. We look for the capacity of a person to grow his business. Is it scalable? Is it investable into? And then based on the needs, based on what it is that he would the entrepreneur would deploy the funds into, we make a contribution, either in the form, like let's talk about debt. Debt is we pay a certain sum and ask that it be repaid over a period in time or at a period in time with a specific return. And these are not too expensive. It depends again on what kind of products does the entrepreneur come up with. And then we eventually also participate in equity, which is to be a part of their journey. We contribute.
Normally it's minority equity.
It's absolutely minority. We don't want to take the creativity part of the investor away, the entrepreneur away. So we contribute into equity because we would like to establish that we would like to partner with them in growth of their product. And we know the money is at risk at the moment we put in, because many startups fail. But angel investing is about investing into companies that perhaps have the potential and grow to a larger scale. We know the businesses out in the world today, they're all concepts. A while back, nobody would have invested into Facebook without
some form of investment. It's either venture capital or angel investing. Yeah,
absolutely, yes.
Yeah. All right. Creativity, imagination, the strongest asset. I agree with that, but I want to hear your take on that. Why do you think the strongest asset is creativity?
It is because no one can take it away, firstly. Nobody can repossess it, if at all it comes to that. And every person is born with some creativity idea, right? Imaginative idea. And I say one has to unlock their own potential. One has to realize that they could get creative by imagining what a need eventually could be. You create the need by taking simple concepts. Let's just take the example of Combi strike today in the country.
Gosh, that one is terrible.
It's terrible. It's affecting a lot of livelihoods. But here is an opportunity for someone to think, well, there is a Combi strike. What can I do now? Can I get somebody to carpool in a way which makes it a lot easier? And if such kind of ideas start coming, maybe it will eventually become a product. Yeah. And the world at large could use it.
Maybe Botswana's own Uber.
Botswana's own Uber, or even better.
Yes.
So I'm just thinking, I mean, we all know the Ubers available in the market. Maybe the concept is not for a local taxi. Think about combis having a carpool system. It could work, and I'm just thinking, I'm not as creative on that field. I could create into a financial field, but I'm sure there are millions out there, the millions of Botswana who have this knowledge or who have the intuition to create something.
Yeah.
And I say unlock it.
I think you're also saying, if I hear you correctly, that a crisis can give birth to an opportunity.
Absolutely. Crisis is usually the birthplace of an opportunity.
I think that's what people need to embrace instead of panicking over every single crisis.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about segue straight into the crisis issue. Crisis management. What crisis have you experienced in your working life and how have you managed it?
Crisis is not new to anyone. As I mentioned, crisis also provides one for an opportunity to think beyond. The pandemic has taught us a lot of ways of managing crisis. You mentioned about travel. We seldom travel now, yet we are able to accomplish all that we wanted to by getting to some place physical. It has made it easier. So to me, the challenges that I come across in my professional life, Mr. Mogobe, is looking at information a little too late. You come at a time when clients come to you desperately wanting your assistance because a taxman is behind them or because a regulatory authority is behind them. And I say this will happen no matter how well you plan it. But don't panic. Reach out to somebody who can assist you and go to them with an open frame of mind to say they will take care of us. And it helps. Believe me, it helps. Why I particularly thought crisis management is again important is if you look at the entrepreneurs today, they start getting dejected just after one pitch and say, nobody's investing into me, so what should I do? They start getting dejected. They fall apart. And I'm saying, don't do that. It is now giving you an opportunity to make your product better, make your pitch better, make your product more marketable.
But I guess, my dear, I'm asking you specifically where you've encountered challenges and difficulties and how you managed to go through those.
Like I mentioned, in my professional life, the way I manage crisis is through firstly interaction and seeking help whenever I need it. I go to people who are the experts. They could be my colleagues. I go to them and say, well, here is a problem that we currently have and how do we manage it? And I have realized that you don't have to have solutions to every problem. All you need is to express the problem and get help from a larger pool of people, friends, family, explain what it is that you're going through, and they'll probably find solutions for you. So the moment you disperse your problem, it becomes easier for it to be managed.
Okay, I'll ask you differently. I realize you won't answer that one specifically, but what major crisis, without mentioning names, did you have to deal with on behalf of a client, and how did you resolve it?
Mogobe, like I said, we know of all the corporate scandals that have rocked the country, right? And as professional accountants, some of them come to us for assistance and help. And what we do at that particular point in time is to break it down into simple, actionable points. Take stock of what has happened, history of why it happened, find out what can be done to mitigate it or how it can be managed by putting in resources who can help and assist. Like I said, some of those problems, we may not find solutions within our own services. We may have to get the help of some experts outside. Do it. And then it eventually makes life easier for the client. It helps the investors now place confidence back on the client that we are helping and serving. And it also brings us good business at the end of the day.
Okay. All right. What do you think of this trend with you accountants becoming gobbling up smaller accounting firms? I mean, I think we talk about the big four, the big five now. What do you think of this trend? Is it really good for the profession that there are just so few dominant firms?
I wouldn't want to use the word gobbling up, but there are larger firms in the country that make it very difficult for the smaller firms or individuals operating in the country. The challenge is actually not it's not the intent of any large firm to impede on the business of a smaller firm. It is basically the regulatory environment that we are all currently under, right? It's becoming a bit of a challenge to comply with all these regulatory frameworks that have come about, your Financial Reporting Act, your compliance to the anti-money laundering policy, the compliance to corporate governance. And smaller firms usually tend to struggle because they don't have enough resources. And eventually they are the ones who reach out and say to the larger firms to kind
Please
of partner
help
with
us.
them.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
please help us. And I think it's because our profession in itself is going through
But it
real
seems to be
regulatory
an
challenges.
international phenomenon, because I mean, we're talking PwC, Grant Thornton. They're actually about 4 or 5 big, and they call themselves the Big Five. So it seems to be an international trend.
Again, like I said, it's very specific to certain countries, and it happens because we believe that with a common pool, with a larger, should I say, base network, you tend to serve clients better. You tend to find solutions better, and that is why I think the smaller firms are eventually coming together to form larger firms. And sometimes the larger firms are also helping the smaller firms by taking them over. I don't think the intent is to get into the business of a smaller firm. It would definitely not sustain or help the local market, specifically because when you have higher cost of establishment, you have got higher costs of providing service as well.
Yeah.
So it would affect the market at large. But my view is, it is because of the smaller firms finding it very difficult to sustain all these challenges.
So isn't it also a question of economies of scale for the firms to survive? They need to, you have firms having up to 100 partners. There has to be. That's the only way that the economies of scale can work out better in terms of distributing risk.
Correct. And like I said, all of this is about finding solutions to the challenges that we currently are facing. There are increasing regulatory failures. When regulators look at the corporates, they find that their financial reporting is not as accurate as it was supposed to be. And they go back to the corporates with findings. And what do the corporates do? They now have to seek advice from somebody. And they can't seek advice from very small firms because the smaller firms wouldn't have the resources to identify and help them. So they come to larger firms for them to be helped at the end of the day. And yes, so eventually larger firms will look at maybe the scalability of operations and say, okay, this is something that we can take, this is something that we can help you with, because we've got network of specialists and experts who have solutions to the problems similar to yours.
Absolutely, absolutely. Speaking of the regulatory environment, there's something that has come up recently with these KYCs, and last year we're even grey listed, I think, and now we've been regularized. Can you help the viewer understand how all these questionable listings come about and how people like yourselves can assist?
Mogobe, it's a very important topic. It's a very important topic for the single reason that you can't deal with someone you don't know, right? An entrepreneur who is just finding his feet may perhaps come across somebody who promises some, things that seem outrageous. And it might seem outrageous, but because of the state that a person is in, they would perhaps enter into business relationship with that under that outrageous contract. Eventually, it lands into trouble because you're probably not dealing with someone of appropriate integrity. Maybe the person who's financing you is not financing you with money that's cleanly earned. So countries across the globe are increasing their regulatory framework for people to know who they deal with, know your customers. And it is not very complicated. You just have to perform some background checks. You will then get to know
what it gets tedious when the bank wants to know you afresh every single year. They want the same documents again and again and again. And they say it's not us, it's the regulations, the requirements from overseas.
You're right. I mean, sometimes when you get too many requests from banks and institutions, including if I were to send you a repeat form to repeatedly ask you information, you would get annoyed. And everyone does. I get annoyed when banks ask me this information repeatedly. But again, it is because they've realized that the system of maintaining information or maintaining an update of information is not as robust as people thought it to be. So they would want to make sure that they get the freshest document and maintain it on records at this particular point in time. But we are getting into a point where this is becoming a little more easier. It is not as difficult to comply with the KYC norm today than it was 2 years ago. Now everyone is used to it. You send a form to a client, the client is more than happy to do it because he's done it several million times. So it helps.
Okay.
It's a discipline, I would say.
Do you think the risk of us being grey-listed or blacklisted still exists?
I don't think the risk can ever go away. All it needs is one bad trigger at the end of the day. It's for everyone to be accountable, not just to themselves, but also to be accountable to the country at large. And this applies to every country. Everyone has to be a responsible citizen, which means complying with something as basic as maintaining your Umang updated, getting your Umang updated. I've realized that we get KYC forms where the Umang is expired, and we then let the person know that your Umang is expired, so you go back and get it sorted. That is when they come to realization about this. So it's about just the simple things. Be a responsible citizen at the end of the day.
Okay. Now, as we come to the end of our conversation, Madi, let me ask you about future prospects. If you had to have a crystal ball and look into the future, where do you see for Madi 10, 15 years down the line? Where do you see for Grant Thornton, assuming you're still a partner?
Mogobe, I think it's the world is moving to a very digital space. I know of many professional chartered accountants fresh out of college who come and they have the qualification. What I tell them is become IT savvy. Start getting into understanding the digital world, because without that we're heading nowhere. Right? And over the next few years, I'm expecting a lot of transactions themselves to be digital, data analytics to play a huge part, and transformation of the current consulting space or the current audit space or the current accounting space into something more digital. Perhaps you don't need to go to an year-end audit and perform transactional testing. Transactions could get tested as and when they are initiated. That makes investors a lot more confident that they are investing into businesses that are reliable, that are able to comply with the necessary requirements. So I think invest your intellect into going digital, and that's where it happens. Personally, we at Grant Thornton have done a lot around this. We assess clients not just in the regular accounting and audit frameworks, but also help them in implementing concepts such as a blockchain and Grant Thornton outside. Yes, Grant Thornton outside.
That's cutting edge stuff.
Yes, it's cutting edge stuff. So we have partners from South Africa and the European countries who are investing heavily into understanding these cryptocurrencies and how they can become how they can become transactional currencies for businesses in the future. So I think it's investing into those ideas. I sincerely believe that Grant Thornton is making its presence felt in many markets, including us.
So yourself personally, you see yourself still part of the organization 15 years, 20 years?
I think Grant Thornton's blood runs deep in my veins. So
Okay.
I would definitely do it.
Oh, that's good.
As long as I can.
Because I think you are in just about every country in SADC, right?
Absolutely. We are represented in over 43 countries in Africa.
43?
Yeah, and not many know it. We have network firms in almost every corner of the globe. We have more than about 160. We are present in more than 116 countries with over 50,000 workforce.
That's a lot. I wonder how many employees you guys have.
I think the employee strength exceeds 50 or 60,000 60,000 numbers. I'm not too sure, but we say it.
And are these companies, firms run independently, or is just one part of a big giant group?
We are a network of firms. Every firm runs independently, but we all have common network ideas and methodologies that come from a central source.
Okay.
We work independently in the countries that we operate from, but we are a network.
Okay.
We carry and use the methodologies that are adopted and used by every country in the globe.
Yeah. Now, this is your chance to ask me a question. You know that you get to ask me one question before we conclude.
Mogobe, my question to you is, with these podcasts, you're reaching out to millions of, I would say, investors, entrepreneurs, businessmen, and so on. What have you found it most satisfying in everything that you do?
So far, in the 2.5 years that we've had this program, the satisfaction of bumping into somebody and saying, your podcast has impacted me, you had guest so-and-so, and they enlightened me in such and such a way. I mean, I've had so many people saying they were impacted by watching Mr. Ram, watching Mr. Khengwenyane, watching, and I'm sure this one, somebody's going to tell me that. Thank you so much. So I think just the feedback I've been getting, because it's really a labor of love, where you don't necessarily get remunerated, but just the idea of exposing people within the ecosystem to this platform is itself a reward. You know, it's satisfying in of itself.
Mr. Mogobe, I think we spoke a lot about creativity, we spoke a lot about imagination. I think by creating this podcast, you've actually created a concept for people to understand that just by listening to somebody speak can help them unlock their potential.
Yeah.
And that's really very, very nice.
Thank you very much, Madi. Your camera is that one? You just look at that viewer, and as we conclude, leave them with one inspirational message as we wrap everything up.
My message is your strongest asset is your creativity. Your strongest asset is how you use that creative idea and transform it into a product or a concept or a service that can help millions of people across. Every day we come across many videos in Twitter, in Instagram, in Facebook, where concepts and ideas are eventually transform people. And I'm saying each one of us have that ability. So let's believe in our ability to create, to be imaginative, and then bring the best out of us. Thank you very much.
Okay. Do you mind giving them your contact details, where they can reach you?
I am a partner at Grant Thornton. You can reach me at our offices in Fairgrounds in Habaroni. We also are present in Francistown, in Francistown. And you can also reach me on my LinkedIn profile. Just look for Madhavan Venkatachy. Again, like I said, just look for a partner at Grant Thornton. You will eventually find me, and you can reach me. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. You've been a wonderful guest.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed the interview.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you for the opportunity.